Good day, Dragon Slayers. This is your host for Dragon Slaying, Tom Bittker, and my guest and emerging partner, Michael Dallen. Michael is the author of the book Behind His Head, The Rainbow Covenant, and I'm author of Dragon Slaying. This is a book about heroic self-transformation, and Michael's book is about God, a more important subject. Let's begin today. Update me about your observations that you shared with me off camera, having visited the country to the north.
Well, in Detroit, Canada is to the south. So that's one thing. We go south into Ontario, south to the city of Windsor, which is, in some ways, it's a little Detroit. It's a car city. It's ragged at the edges. It's a Rust Belt kind of city. It's a British Empire, a British Commonwealth city. The ethnic groups are very different from Detroit. You have, well, the people there were telling me, the different groups that they've got now. And there used to be hordes of Chinese students, of really competitive, really young students at their universities. They've got some good universities. And we would see them at one of my schools at Wayne State. They would come over. Since 9/11, the border has been obstructed. It's been very hard to get across these last 23 years or so. The security precautions are, they're tight. People are very nervous. The businesses that used to count on, visitors from the other countries have died at the vine.
I should comment that in my youth, actually well into around the 90s even, going to Canada was the equivalent of crossing the state lines between Nevada and California.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, you have to go through the ag inspection, to get into California, but that was about it.
But, there's a fair amount of interchange. In fact, my family would regularly go and visit in Windsor. My mother delighted in shopping there, as I recall. And we would regularly take fishing trips up into Ontario. So there was a great, I would say, communal closeness between people in Windsor and people in Detroit. In fact, indeed, you happen to go to Windsor in honor of our own relative who had moved there.
And her son to this day, our beloved cousin Alan Cohen, goes every day. They have a very vital paper business, and his father lives there. His father is a Queen's counselor, which is, a senior attorney, distinguished attorney. There was a very vital Jewish community there, and people at this event whose children have all left Windsor. They're all somewhere else. We're from Toronto to other cities in Canada, and particularly they've come to American cities. They're in Detroit, they're in Chicago, New York, California. They don't have their children there, but they remember where there would be. They lived in a neighborhood with 4 kosher butchers, 2 kosher stores. They had a very distinguished set of rabbis there. They're still there, but the average age is verging on deceased, and they're getting a new rabbi, just a reform rabbi, which just thrills me because he's an old classmate of mine, and I haven't seen him since he became religious. I mean, it's been decades, scores of years, and he was this tall, really good-looking guy, and we played football. I remember him from football games and baseball games, and he became a rabbi, a congregational rabbi. So they're going to have him.
Excuse me, did you know him in law school or in undergrad school?
I knew him in grammar school. I haven't seen him since before our bar mitzvahs. But he fell into the orbit of a distinguished Eastern European chazan or cantor, and he just loved celebrating Judaism. That's a part of Judaism that I've never been all that nuts about, the ceremonial, the public ceremonial. But he took to it like a duck to water. And so we'll see about that. And they have well, and they've had quite a history, but at the moment, it's a fading history, and we'll see how it goes, but it's like the fading history of all these towns, and I told you about the famous twins, as they called them. Dear Abby and her sister, Ann Landers, and they came from, like, Davenport, Iowa, one of these 3 cities along the Missouri and the Mississippi, and those were vital towns for Jews. You had Goldstein's furniture store and Cohen's meat market and all kinds of things like that, Jewish cemeteries, Jewish synagogues, and the Jews are pretty much all gone from those places. Their kids have gone off to, more exciting places. It's a brain drain, you know, these places have, and you need a critical threshold to keep the young Jews there because their prospects are highly educated and their prospects are national and international. One of these fellows there, old guy about my age, was telling me about a recent adventure he had in Singapore, where, he was wheeling and dealing, uh, with, factories, and these, different, dealing with industrial policy and, major corporations. The people like to be involved in things like that, and Windsor it's kinda hollowed out. Our cousin Alan calls it for him, claustrophobic because it's such a small community now, and,
The occasion that drew you to Windsor was a memorial service for our late cousin, Elaine. I find at this point in my life, I'm attending memorial services far more often than I attend baseball games, which
well, this is how things work out if you're lucky, I mean, this is how you want them to work out, and you don't want people to be coming to your memorial service.
I hope they will.
But yeah, well,
I don't have,
however it goes, the thing is, it's better to go to a memorial service than be the subject of a memorial service.
but I,
I am thinking of a line I heard about Teddy Roosevelt, that at every wedding, he wanted to be the bride. At every funeral, he wanted to be the corpse, And I I don't particularly need the glory,
you
I
like
just wanna
you like
I
living.
wanna
Yeah. You're one of those carpe diem guys, seize the
yeah,
day.
right on,
Okay,
right
so
on.
where I'd like to take this is both you and I in recent days have thought a lot about immortality. And I've been looking at descriptions of near death experiences, and I'm impressed with the level of symmetry of these experiences across cultures. There's often an experience of being kind of a disembodied observer. There's often time where we reunite with our deceased relatives, and there are some compelling insights for people that have had these experiences that are often life transforming. And I'm interested in how you view this as a person who has been faithful to his religion for a good half of your life. Also, I would also observe that in those occasions when I believe God has touched my life, it's not come at a time of, oh my God, help me. It usually comes at a time where there's an ongoing rhythm in my life where I offer gratitude, I pray for others, myself, the future. And then suddenly I recognize in retrospect that there has been divine intercession. And I guess one of my comments about all of this is that our relationship with God probably works best if it's not a drive-by relationship, if it's an ongoing practice of faith, a discipline. Your
Well,
thoughts?
we look to our father Abraham, the rock from which we were hewn, in the words of the Navi, of the prophet, and, he's our model man, and, and he was a lover of God, beloved by God. Even our language is a little corrupt. We use the German word God, Gott, to express deity, the idea of deity. And in Hebrew, we have these other words, names for God, which, are all different levels of holiness that we're a little chary of using in casual conversation. But, you get this idea of, the God of Israel is not like the God of the Baal worshippers or the Romans or the Italians. He's not the hairy thunderer, the cosmic muffin of other religions. He is. I think a lot of people have the idea that he's a figment. They just can't believe this idea that there is this super intelligent eternal being of supernal holiness, of great decency, of overwhelming kindness, um, that somehow exists. But but we believe that, and that he is, not just a hairy thunderer and not just a cosmic muffin, but as that he's involved with every particle and force in his creation, that he is as aware of the movement of a mote of dust between Alpha Centauri and Pluto as he is with doings in the Kremlin or Washington or in our bedrooms, that he is one with everything, aware of everything, but distant, separate. We don't share the Spinoza idea of God is in every particle, but we do believe that he affects every particle and that he's with it, that he knows it, that he sustains it somehow. We who live in a world that is a universe that's made predominantly of matter that we call dark, because we don't know what the hell it is. It's not, physically dark. It's not black or anything, or, has low color contrast, but we just don't know what it is. We don't know what, dark energy is, but that's a majority, by far, the vast majority of the energy and the matter in the universe. He's there somewhere. And we regard him, and we know that he is the, the God of Abraham, that he is a living being. He is not a person, but he's a personality. He has character. We've seen again and again that he has an acute sense of humor, but he's not human. I had a friend who loved my book, a Catholic American, Irish American guy, who was saying that it's harder for man to apprehend God than it would be for an ant to apprehend a man. It's just, we're dealing with something that is so infinite and above us. I don't think it's that bad. I think Abraham would address God as, here I am, I'm just dust and ashes talking to you, the creator of the universe, the sustainer of the universe. But we can communicate with this being. I remember the idea that the basic Hebrew prayer is Baruch Atah Hashem Eloheinu melech haolam. Blessed are you, the King melech haolam, the King of all, the King of the universe. We can be in a dialogue with him. We use the word him to express the idea of he is an active, not a passive presence in the universe. He doesn't wait to be, pricked by a male member. He's independent of that. We would say it, except Hebrew has no neuter clause. But he's obviously far beyond any consideration of sex or gender. So we use he. Probably sounds sexist, but it's not. It's just philological. think a lot
So,
of people I think a lot of people have the idea that we believing people don't really believe, because it's such a ridiculous idea that we should have this Father in heaven, when the fact is that some of the brightest people who have ever lived, the most brilliant, the best informed, Sir Isaac Newton, for one, who was a Gentile, who did not start out, with belief in the God of Abraham, but who came to it But you do have these brilliant, brilliant people who again and again came to the conclusion. They didn't just feel, but they came to the logical, intellectual conclusion that this God of Abraham is the real thing.
Well, I think we were discussing yesterday off camera that the miracle of the universe and the miracle of humankind, as we look at it now and as scientists explore it, would be infinitesimally impossible without the agency of an intelligent consciousness.
Right. Exactly. But you go out in the world and you look at the pictures from the Hubble telescope or, any of the pictures of the cosmos that come in, or you look at the sea, the curve of a woman, the hand of a child. How can you conclude this is all an accident? That this just happened as an oops, as a little glitch in the cosmic temperature. I mean, I think creation bears the handiwork of the maker. You see him using the same tricks again and again. Like if you see a picture of the nebula, you'll see the same pattern that you get in the design of a pizza. That physical things come together in the same way. An eye, human eye, an animal eye will look like a small map of the cosmos. But the idea that we don't believe that, that there's some secret knowledge that where people are too smart to believe in God, and that they just go through the trappings of religion is just not right. The most brilliant people have come to believe in the God of Abraham, and for good reason. And, because he is evidence of his existence and of his creativity and of his greatness and kindness and compassion come up in our lives. As you get older, you run into it and are more sensitive to it. The thing about this invisible God, though, this God who cannot be represented because we don't have the means to no man can see God and live. I mean, so the Romans laughed at the Jews because, don't have a visible God. What the hell is that? A God that cannot be imagined is a hard God to follow. I've got a book here by Walter Lippmann, um, and he's going on about it's impossible for people to believe in a God that can't be imagined. Israel has been following this. I mean, we've been teaching this for ages, but most people just can't get their heads around it. They need something that they can imagine so that they can follow. That old line that man makes God his gods in his own image doesn't apply to the religion of Israel, to the religion of Abraham. We don't make God in our own image because it's ridiculous. So
Is the converse not true that man was created in the image of God? That is the
right.
template.
The Tselem Elohim made the word Elohim means the powers, the lords. Yeah, well, what the hell does that mean? Made in the image of God. We take that to be not a physical, visible resemblance to the deity, because he's God. He is. We know that he is one. We know that he is one with a unity beyond any unity. He is as one as a point in geometry, absolutely indivisible. But he extends across the up throughout all creation. He's everywhere. So how can a being be one and everywhere and eternal? And how can you imagine that? I mean, it is really unimaginable. Nonetheless, that is the recipe. That's the code for him. And on top of that, he he's fully aware and capable of interaction with all of his creatures. This is one hell of a being, um, and some call him a figment. Then we have the evidence of Israel in the world. And the Torah is full of this. The Bible, the Old Testament is full of this. That you are my witnesses. God declares, this being declares, through you, I, God, will be understood. You will bring people to me through your offices as a missionary people, as a people who prove my existence. So you look at the history of the Jews in the world, and the history of the Jews in the world is one of greater comprehension, love of God. The idea is that as you see the successes and adventures of the Jews on earth, which is what the Bible is all about. I mean, the Bible is Israel's history book. You know, it starts with Adam, and then the next thing you know, it's all about the people of Israel, the Jews. And it is the story of Israel with this messianic, this message of uh, the immanence and the transcendence and the holiness and the greatness of God. So it's all about the deity. You know, it isn't just good cooking. It isn't about Jewish humor. All these things lead to greater knowledge of God. They're all part of the gestalt, the story of human apprehension of God in the world. But it's funny because we live in a time that is so godless, where people reject the idea. You know, and I've just been at all these different Jewish gatherings with some family. And there we are for Thanksgiving. And I don't know what kind of brachas or blessings you heard at Thanksgiving, but if I hadn't said them at my family's gathering, you know, with an appreciation for, a blessing, blessed are you who provides us, the grub, what we're going to eat and drink, and has got us together alive at this time. And then, and by the way, thank you for the meal. The Jews are the only people I know who say a blessing after the meal. It's commanded. It's a Torah commandment. It's not. The rabbis tell us to say a blessing, some blessings before, but it's the Torah. It's Moses, our teacher, dictating, as it were, God's message, or recording, transcribing God's message. We're supposed to say, we bless him after. Thank you. Thank you for this. We had some nice people together, but Eddie Lane's memorial service and a meal afterwards, nobody even thought to thank the giver of all of this. The same thing at Thanksgiving. It's Thanksgiving, and to not say Thanksgiving, after Thanksgiving, you know. So we've fallen away a little bit. I have the sense that your grandfather, my great-grandfather, would have been appalled at this kind of thing. He would have been, and he and his wife would have been calling people back together, Kinderla, children, come, sit, and we're going to say the blessing, and the blessing we would say would be the traditional blessing that I think that we all say. By the way, I've seen exactly this thing in Israel too. I was with one of our relatives' family. They'd come from Iraq. They'd smuggled these believing, devout people, and they'd smuggled these hardcover Haggadahs all the way from Baghdad. What a schlep. All these heavy, heavy books. We have these Maxwell House paperbacks for our Haggadah, the Passover story. They brought back hardcover books, and they brought them with great devotion. And I'll tell you, and there we are in a city outside Tel Aviv, and we got into arguing politics, and nobody got to. We had the grandparents there who were appalled, and no, we'd rather talk politics than say a long blessing. So the point of the religion of Judaism is to keep people God conscious. Judaism is all about God consciousness. So we have all these blessings and all these services and all these things that we're supposed to do. Some people wear special fringes all day. I wear them only in the morning. They put on tefillin, these phylacteries, or these leather boxes with scrolls of Torah in them. We have mezuzahs on the doors of our houses, on our gates, everywhere, and we touch them. to be reminded of our marching orders, and our marching orders are be God conscious, thank God, follow his ways, pay attention to the statutes, and the teachings of Moses, our teacher, which are to celebrate the God of Abraham and to be, as much as possible, his lovers, his friends, his messengers. I try to say every day, Ana Abdad Kedusha Brechu. I am a servant of the Holy One, blessed be He. And this is a Shabbos prayer, but it's something that we can and should say, I think, all the time. The honor of not just the Jewish people, but of the God of the Jewish people, which is to say, God depends on our conduct. That's a big deal. The idea that man has the capability of both honoring and dishonoring God, the master of the universe, the supernal being, that it matters to him how he is regarded in the minds of his creatures. It doesn't make him vain. It just shows that he wants to be a good parent. He's jealous of his children's allegiance. That is one of the teachings of Judaism. It's also one of the principal teachings of the Rainbow Covenant. One of the 7 laws is a law against defamation of God. So you don't have to be Jewish to defame God. You don't have to be Jewish to honor God. And in fact, I remember another psychiatrist I was talking to was saying that in the scheme of things, that the Jews are the cool kids and Gentiles are, yeah, and that's just not that. Yeah, the Jews have a mission, but the idea that God has infinite love, eh, for all his creatures, or that he is capable of infinite love for all his creatures, that his love for one isn't diminished by his love for others, is also a principle of Judaism. We forget it. Jews forget it. It's just the truth. Anything else defames him. So we try not to defame God, which is rough when you consider how he's defamed all the time, by our scatterbrainedness and our self-absorption and, our appetites, our hungers, and our distraction.
But he does want us to, and you raised that a couple of times as you referred to the Noahic laws. He does want us to follow
of honoring him, of being aware of him, of being God conscious, of being of him, who God of kindness and truth and honesty, who hates oppression.
But if we follow the covenant, we follow his law, that is the path.
Well, yeah, but the covenant, his law, I mean, it allows for it's all about God consciousness. I mean, the Jews have our own particular marching orders, that we're supposed to wear a fringe garment, at least, for some moment of the day. A Gentile isn't obligated to wear a fringe garment. We Jews are to not eat animals that were killed with cruelty, and a Gentile can eat, an animal that it's not forbidden. It's not a good idea, but it's not forbidden. But the Gentile also is supposed to come to God and learn about what he wants. So I have the idea that Newton, who was a Noahide, who was a secret, they would have hung Newton and quartered him and tortured him if they'd known that he was following up Judaism. It was fine for him to be an alchemist, but they didn't want him screwing around with the religion of Abraham. That would have been a deal breaker. But I have the idea that well, I mean, even the New Testament has, a semblance, an early primitive statement of the Noahide laws. And stay away, in Acts, it says, stay away from certain kinds of meat. Don't eat things strangled. Don't eat blood, and they're getting at it. But, I mean, what God does do is invite us to a very intellectually stimulating and demanding interchange with him to find out how can we be his best servant? And we all have our covenants. We have the covenant with Abraham, through Abraham. We're circumcised. We have to be circumcised. That's part of the covenant. The Gentile doesn't have to be circumcised, nonetheless can live an intimate relationship with the deity. Um, and he might decide later that he would want to have his children circumcised, his son circumcised, to come closer to the deity. The idea is imitatio Deo, the imitation of God. You want to be like him. You want to follow his ways of compassion, uh, and justice seeking, and love, and charity, and all that. So, what do you think?
I think you've done well to
Well,
encapsulate a few minutes the message of Judaism.
God consciousness is, it's not rocket science. I mean, we have rocket scientists who are devout Jews, a lot. I've met some, and it is extremely intellectually rewarding, and it's demanding. We're always working on it, and nobody gets 100%. Dealing with the infinite, the deity. So we do the best we can. The way, the truth, the light is what we think it is until we find out better.
Well, as you pointed out in one of our earlier discussions, that the Starship Enterprise would not have been launched had it not been Jews on the flight deck.
Telling you. I'm telling you, second generation too. Even the robot Data, Brent Spiner, uh, circumcised member of the covenant of Abraham. And, but yeah, I was just telling somebody in Canada about visiting the Mount Royal and the Jewish cemetery up on it in Montreal, looking for the Shatners, because I really wanted to find the Shatners, and not to mention the Bellows of Saul Bellows people and the Mordecai Richlers and all these other people. And I think I told you, I just saw today that Tom Stoppard, the great playwright, was Jewish. Yeah, who knew? I didn't know. And or my beloved pop star Doja Cat, this extremely sexy black who was introduced the term yuck to to modern pop music. And I wondered where she got that from, and it turned out that her mother was something like Bessie Friedman. You know, Bessie Friedman begot Doja Cat. And go figure. But Doja Cat is entitled to use that. Ugh, yuck. That's Moses, her teacher. So
Yeah, well, where would be without the Jews in Wizard of Oz?
really,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I've often said that without the Jews and the human in history, the life on Earth would be worse than we would look up to a North Korean prison camp. It would be just unspeakable. One thing the Jews do is try to bring to life the principles of the seven mitzvahs of the Noahide Law, and the key provision of that is that God is made in the image of God.
Man is amazing.
And again, that's a weird thing, because he has no image. But the idea is that every human being is sacred, and that you don't just kill people because they're inconvenient, like a Stalin or a Hitler would, or punish people because their relatives are wrongdoers, like the North Koreans would. If you've got that, you've got a lot. If you've got the idea that God is involved with the world and that he cares about his creatures, you've got a lot. If you have internalized the idea that God cares about how people treat animals, that's the Torn Limb commandment of the Noahide Laws, that this is a matter of vital importance to him, and that life is not just a dream. Life is not just, as many religions teach, life is not just a dream, an illusion, but it's real, and that the pain of animals actually matters to him, that it's as real can be, then you've got a lot. If you have the idea from, you know, pursuant and in accordance with the seven laws, that man has the ability to both honor and dishonor God in our lives, you've got a lot. And if you have the idea that God can communicate with man through the written word, you've really got a lot. Um, that's I've had friends and clients who just couldn't get along with that. That's ridiculous. You know, imagine that the written word should contain things instead of just a direct apprehension of reality, would be that all that would matter to them. And when you visit a Jewish household, you find out that these are the people of the book. We believe in written words.
So, comment, if you would, Michael, for a moment on an omnipotent and an omniscient God that empowers mankind with the opportunity to choose. What is the message in that?
Well, that's how we're made in the image. You don't have to, you we're not creatures of instinct. We're not locked into instinct. We have the ability to make up our minds as to what we want. We don't have to. I remember being with a beautiful girl, and she was driving me nuts because it was my appetites that were leading me to be to be with her, and I found it difficult to walk away. And um, I, um, I I think without that, we're not human. Without that, we're not godlike. We're just machines. We're just animals, and not very interesting animals. But we we
Then
we
it,
can.
that implies, though, that there are lessons to be learned in the way we choose.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
Well, we hope to grow. No, I mean, to me, life is mostly a search for, God consciousness. What is God consciousness? It's a search for truth, and we go where the truth dictates. We never advocate a lie. We say that God is truth. If you think we can agree in general, if you do follow these ideas that you will not lie, you can fib to protect people's feelings, obviously. We live in a world, you don't have to have a truth party every time you turn around. Search of our lives is to find out what is true. What is God? God is truth. And if we're going to do that successfully, we have to have free will to explore every ramification, that is every permutation that's part of the search pattern.
we each have lessons to learn as we choose.
Every human being has his own growth protocol or path,
And our hope is to grow closer to God in the process.
closer to God, closer to the truth, to know what is true, to know what is. Yeah. And it's a very noble objective. And in doing that, I think, make ourselves more palatable to God. We become better friends of God. I remember someone I knew went, "Come, you have all these revelations from thousands of years ago and nothing new." Well, I don't think it's quite true that we have nothing new, because, I mean, I think we both have a feeling that we've had communication of a sort with deity, with holiness in our lives, but we have an image of what happens when God favors, you know, someone too much, and they become these passive idiots. They become like a vegetable, like vegetables, waiting for God to come and rescue them. Life is supposed to be struggle. We're supposed to work. Work is again one of these Noahide values. We know from the Bible, he loves it when people work together, even if the cause isn't so great. But he wants to see people taking the world and improving it. Our obligation is to make this planet of man a better planet, and to survive, and keep it going. But we have, for instance, an example where the Philistines get the Ark of the Covenant, and they just have the most awful luck. Horrible things happen to them while they have the Ark of the Covenant. So the lords, the Sarin of the Philistines, do a little scientific experiment, and they put the Ark of the Covenant on a cart, and they put these milch cows that all have calves, and they hitch them to the cart, and the milch cows miraculously take that cart away from their own calves into the nearest Hebrew settlement. And the Sarin are watching this, they're taking notes, they can't get over it. This is obviously from heaven. And the Hebrews are obviously favored in all of this. And the cart eventually gets to the nearest Hebrew village, it's a 20-minute cart journey, and the cows mooing all the way, complaining. And they get to the Hebrew village, and the Hebrews, our ancestors are, and they go, "Great, free barbecue." And they take not only that, and they have the Ark of the Covenant back with them. So, they can't decide which is better. And so they have the Ark of the Covenant, and it came back miraculously, and they and completely in total defiance of the laws of the sacrifices. You can't take a female, a cow. You can take a bull, but not a cow, and use it as a burnt offering sacrifice, or a partial sacrifice. And they have barbecue, free meat. And the Philistines are looking at this, and 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 it's clear that God has discredited himself by his favoritism to these people. Um, Suppose you have somebody who feels that God is carrying him, and then it happens that his child gets sick, or his parent gets sick, or his buddy, you know, has an accident, and the impulse is to rebel. I thought I was your fair-haired boy, O King of the universe, and now you went and you screwed up my kid, and he has polio or some awful thing. Or my mother, she's lost her marbles. And what kind of God are you? So, I mean, you can go from rebellion to vegetable passivity. It's difficult dealing with people. You want to engage them as much as possible, or you want to engage us as much as possible without turning us into a bunch of slackers or rebels. So,
So God compels discipline.
well, he expects us to do things, but if he came around too often, what would we do? We'd be rebels and passive dependent slackers, like a bunch of fat guys lying around in their parents' basement playing video games. You know, that is not the ideal. That is not the human or the divine ideal. Um, we're supposed to work and make the world better
Michael,
and
thank you.
entertain greater God consciousness.
Review of how God ought to be in our lives. We are coming up on some holidays. What do you plan to do the next few weeks?
Oh, Hanukkah? Well, we have some time.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Well, God willing, I'll be writing, and we have a big website work to be done.
What are you going to do on your website?
What are we going to do? I hope to make it much more compelling, and I've got to put up these. Among other things, we have to properly frame these podcasts that we've been doing. I'm going to borrow them from you, and
That would be
so
that would be great if we had it on your.
yeah, yeah. Well, we should have had it by now, but we don't. But at least I don't think we do. But I think we can frame and feature them much more effectively than we have.
Well, that would be marvelous. Well, I look forward to the continuing exploration of life, God,
Okay.
immortality, and your anchor faith in Judaism.
Okay.
Yep.
Amen.
Amen. Okay.
All right.